Okay, today we are going to talk about the wonderful world of URLs. Oh boy, is this exciting. I don't know if you could get any more excited about this topic than I am. Unless, oh, that guy's excited. He's excited. Oh yeah. Wow, URLs. Why would I care about URLs, Uniform Resource Locators? Well, for three reasons. Number one, if you are using the web, you're using a web browser, that URL helps you know where you are. It helps you orient, it helps you figure out, am I talking to the right site? Where am I on the site? What am I doing? There have been web browsers that have come out where they don't show you the URL anymore. Because frankly, for most sites, it's pretty wonky. It's full of gibberish, nobody cares. They have always kept us the ability to see the URL. And that's for the second reason. When you are using the web, knowing where you are protects you from phishing scams. And we'll talk about this more when we talk about network security. But sometimes you'll get a URL that says, oh my goodness, you are overdrawn at the bank. Come, click here and go see your bank balance. And you get to a website that looks exactly like your bank. And you log in and your bank balance is fine. But now some Nigerian prince has your bank information because the URL was not your bank's URL. They pointed you somewhere else. Yes, sir?
One of the best viruses on the internet right now is a Microsoft Office virus that you go to some website and somehow download it, and then it says your computer is infected. Please go to this website and you input all your information. Now they have your credit card information, name, address, and you think it's Microsoft.
Yep.
And it's not.
The way you can escape some of those, not all of those, because they're getting more and more sophisticated as time goes on, is to know where am I and to look up at your URL. The third reason that we are going to spend time on URLs today is because as web designers, you are all designing web pages, URLs are how you go get new and interesting stuff. Web URLs allow you to link your page to another page. They allow you to bring in images, and that's what the assignment has. You go find an image. We're also going to talk about different kinds of image types today. But URLs are the way the web connects. It's, in fact, the big deal about the web. Prior to Tim Berners-Lee, in fact, back in the 40s, there was a guy named Vannevar Bush. Not of those bushes. He was a different Bush. And he had this really cool idea that somehow, find the sign-up sheet, make sure you sign up. Somehow, if you could have a microfiche machine, have you guys ever seen a microfiche machine? It has a little film strip-like thing and kind of goes, and you see images of newspapers usually. It's the way they used to store data. Anyway, he had this scheme where you could somehow encode in a microfiche frame the address of another microfiche spool in another frame so that you could go find that thing really easy. It was a really cool idea. And of course it was completely unworkable because who's going to do that? Later on in the 60s, they tried to make big mainframe computer systems that were linked together. One of the more famous ones was called Xanadu. And everybody said, yeah, no one's ever going to want to link from one document to another. What's the point of that? And it didn't work. Finally, in fact, people were working on these ideas of markup languages. IBM invented the whole idea of a markup language. The idea that you could somehow put characters inside your text that said something about the text. This is a heading, this is a body, this is a reference. That's an old idea. But without the network that we have now, it never paid off. So back in the 90s, a couple things happened that together made the web as we know it today possible. One is this hyperlink idea became codified, if you will, in the URL syntax that we know today, where they came up with kind of a universal way of specifying, I want to link to something and it's over here. So it's like a universal address for things out on a network somewhere. That was the first thing. The second thing was the network became pervasive. Most of you guys weren't around in that period of time, or if you were, you weren't paying attention to the computer biz. It used to be that most computers didn't live on a network. It was unusual to have a computer that actually had a network connection. And the main reason at most of the companies I worked at was, well, why would I need a network? There are no other computers on the network. Who am I going to talk to? And I actually remember being at a guy's house where he hooked his 300 baud modem, put his phone into the 300 baud modem, you know, that little suction cup thing. And he types in some stuff, looks less like a normal computer. And he says, now we're on the Stanford Linear Accelerator Control computer. And I was like, no way. He said, yeah, we're in Stanford, we're in Stanford. And he types around and he goes, look at this, look at this. And he brings up something else. He says, look at this, look at this. Now we're on a computer in Russia. And you can tell it's a computer in Russia because this is its backbone address. This is before IP addresses. And it was so cool to be on what was then called the ARPANET. And there were probably 100 machines that were networked to each other. And I was on one of them. I had gotten into Stanford and that had taken me to Russia. This is all old man, you're kidding me type stories, because now we are so networked, it's unusual to find a computer that's off the net. In fact, later on in the term, we'll do a little bit of network security, and we'll talk about even getting your computer off the net doesn't protect you from attack. Any case, so now we've got hyperlinks, we've got URLs, we've got networks everywhere. Networks everywhere. And the last thing was they took this really arcane, fancy markup language that IBM had developed. It was called SGML, Standard Generic Markup Language. Way complex. In fact, I tried to learn it, no one bothered. It was just way too complex. And Berners-Lee and his buddy, I forget what his buddy's name, said, we're going to cut all that stuff out, and all we're going to have is headers, tags, headers, paragraphs, and links. In fact, the first hypertext markup language didn't even have images in it. All of that by simplifying the markup language, by having network computers, by having this concept of I can link from document to document in a uniform way, and then everything took off from there. Everything took off from there. None of these technologies were new. They've been around since the 40s, since the 60s. But because a convergence of opportunity arose, all sorts of things took off. So now almost all of our stuff comes in, or can come in through the web. Have you guys ever used Safari.O'Reilly? I think it's IE. Is IE or EI? I don't know. Let's find out.
I think it's
If you get to the point where if you get to the point where you're freelancing or you are there it is.
It's UI.
Where you're in the business of learning, like me, and if you're going to get a job in an IT industry, you have got to learn new stuff all the time. You're doing it now, so you're getting into the habit. It's great. You're going to be in a line of work where everything you know is obsolete every 5 years. And you just got to throw it away and learn something new. Whether it's programming languages, whether it's network protocols, whether it's the latest and greatest, anything. If you're in a high-tech industry, a high-tech profession like this, you got to learn new things all the time. And the cool thing is, for most of us in this line of work, that's the fun part. You do this because it's fun to learn new stuff. And for most humans, it's fun to learn new stuff. Especially if you can make money, because you know more than the guy next to you. That's the whole deal with a lot of these professions. You get into the job because you know something, you rise to the top because you learn faster than other people, and people love you for it. One of the tools in your toolkit is online libraries now. And I would recommend to you, I've been using this one for 10 or 15 years now. This is one of the older ones. There are others. But this is a place where there are literally thousands of books online. It's getting to the point now when I'm sitting in a doctor's office or something reading a magazine, and I read something in the article that I want to learn more about, I caught myself touching the page, going, I want to learn, whoa, it doesn't do anything. Oh, that's right, it's on a piece of paper. And what's interesting is my niece, who is 6 years old, who has been brought up on an iPad, she was reading a paper book the other day, and I saw her actually do this. She went, and I thought, in the future, and for her, in the present, the idea of not having stuff hyperlinked to more stuff is just nutty. Everything's hyperlinked. Everything's hyperlinked. So, let's talk about these hyperlink ideas. Let's talk about the universal resource locator. That's the heart of web stuff. Now, you're not going to be responsible for understanding everything I throw up here today. That's an unfortunate phrase. But you are going to be responsible for parts of it. In fact, you have to use parts of this stuff in the next assignment. You'll have to answer questions about URLs in your quizzes. And because I'm just tricky that way, I'm not going to tell you which parts you have to be responsible for. So let's just start. Now you've seen URLs like this all the time. www.google.com. All the time. So let's break this down. The first thing is there's a scheme, or sometimes this is called a protocol. That's the first part of the URL. That's always followed by a colon. It's always followed by a colon. Then sometimes you'll see 2 forward slashes. By the way, this is a forward slash, this is a backward slash. Which operating systems tend to use these? Anyone know? No, you guys are so young. Young and so excited about the world.
Unix, Linux.
Unix, Linux, Mac OS underneath. Which operating systems use this one? What about? Microsoft DOS started with a backslash. You can, in the old Microsoft browsers, you couldn't use these forward slashes. Microsoft was kind of nasty that way. Either use our slashes or nobody's. And typically, things like Mosaic, the precursor to Mozilla, the precursor to Firefox, they wouldn't let you use backslashes, because that's nasty, that's Microsoft. These days, you can pretty much use either one you want. Most modern browsers are tolerant. But the spec has them all as forward slashes. If you want to send a URL to a person who doesn't know their way around computers, and you want them to cut and paste it, get it right for them. We're going to use forward slashes. The existence of these 2 forward slashes is significant. Whether those are there in the URL is important, and it's important for your current assignment. The next thing that you'll normally see in a URL, well, actually you normally won't see this in a URL. So when you guys log into a system, usually you have to supply 2 things. What's usually the first thing when you log into a system? What's the first thing you usually give it?
Username.
Your username, user ID, username. And you can usually see this, right? What is this good for? It seems like a stupid and obvious question, but why do you have to supply your username to a website? So it can identify you. Now sometimes that's for security reasons, because only you are allowed to see certain things. Sometimes it's for marketing reasons, because they want to build a model of who you are so they can sell you more stuff. But in any case, it's important for people to be able to identify themselves to computers and say, this is me, get me my stuff. So you will see that in a URL. Username can be part of a URL. If you are going to say, I want something that only I'm allowed to see, you can put your username in the URL. Now what's this field typically, the second one? When you log into something, you supply a username, and you always supply something else. What is that?
Password?
A password. Can you see that password?
No.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, it used to be the old way of doing things is you just see dots as you typed. And the idea there was that, well, you don't want someone looking over your shoulder and seeing what your password is. You'll still see that all over the place. Really, that doesn't mean anything. That's an example of security theater. Why? Well, because all you have to do is look down at the keyboard while they type, and you can see their password. They're typing it right there. If you're on a phone these days, because phones are so hard to type on, they actually show you the letter while you're typing. So down on the keyboard, they'll show you the letter, and then they'll draw a dot up here. And the other thing is, like at an ATM where you punch in your PIN code,
Yeah.
now if you have an infrared camera, and infrared cameras are cheap, after someone walks up to an ATM, all you have to do is take a picture of the PIN pad, and you can see which 4 digits they touched. Because by touching the key, your finger warmed it up. It's much easier to guess, because you know it's 4 digits, and one of them's a 1, one of them's a 7, and one of them's an 8, one's a 2. It's really easy to guess the PIN, because you only have to do, what, 16 tries.
Well, it'd be even easier if you had an infrared because the first one touched would be lighter than the last one touched.
Exactly. Exactly. So, the whole idea of keeping a password secret, it's still necessary. But the idea of just because you obscure it here isn't enough. So typically when I'm sitting with someone at a keyboard, when I'm tutoring someone, I typically make a big deal about looking away while they type in their password. Why? Because my mother told me to cover my mouth when I cough. It's just a gentlemanly thing to do, to say, I'm not going to pay attention to your password. If you want to steal somebody's password, just watch them type. You'll know it immediately. If you're at a PIN station, at a checkout counter, if your PIN station doesn't have a hood, so people can't see how you type, cover it with your hand. There are cameras everywhere, and they can tell what your PIN is just by watching you type. If you're at a bank ATM, make sure you cover your PIN. And in fact, what I used to do when I first learned about infrared cameras is I'd do the PIN, and then I would just touch the whole keypad with my hand, so that all the keys would be the same. You think this is a small deal, but millions and billions of dollars are stolen from people every year 2 ways. They put a little piece of plastic on the ATM right where you put your card in. It looks just like a bezel. It looks just like a piece of plastic. In fact, it looks just like the ATM's piece of plastic. Right in the edge of that thing is a magnetic reader. So as your card goes into the ATM, the bad guy reads it just the same way that the ATM reads it. He's got a webcam somewhere, and as you put your card in and hit your PIN, he gets your card number, he gets your PIN. This happens a lot. People lose their identities frequently. All of this is to say, passwords are important. We'll go over them again. A lot of times, passwords aren't as secure as you might think they are. And in fact, in URLs, this is one of those times. Because if you want something on the net, and you put in your ID, put in your password, it's sent in the clear. It's just text. And anyone who can see that URL, and that includes everyone on the network between you and the server, can see that password.
Like when PlayStation got hacked last month.
Yeah.
They were able to see everybody's information, their addresses, their card numbers, everything.
Yeah. Man, Sony took it in their shorts on that one. They are still suffering from that.
They were warned many times too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so many things around security. We'll be taking another look at. Would you make sure he gets the sign-up sheet?
Is it a colon or a period? Because I know FTP-wise it's a colon. Is it a period for HTTP?
I believe it's a period between login dot password. And then at the end here, there's an @ sign. This is optional, obviously, because most of the time you don't do this because it's not a secure method of doing it. Because you're sending people's usernames and passwords in the clear across the net, it's not a good way to do it. It's built into the protocol, however. And in older protocols like FTP, which aren't secure. It's a real common thing. Because, frankly, I'm talking to a trusted machine, I'm on an intranet, I'm not going across the net, no one's sniffing on me, I can do that. If you find yourself at a website that is asking you for an authenticated URL like this, ooh, you're in a bad neighborhood. You're in a bad neighborhood. Okay, so the next thing that you typically see is the address. The address of the server. The address of the server. This is an address of the server. Now you can break this thing down. This is called a domain name. This is the top level domain. This is the domain owned by the company. And then this is a particular machine. Or either a real machine or a virtual machine. Top level domains are typically what? .com. What's another top level domain?
Edu.
Yep, .org, .edu. Pretty soon you'll be able to buy your own top level domain. Pardon me? .xxx, yes. And typically, because this is just like real estate, this is exactly analogous to real estate. Some real estate is more valuable than other real estate. And unfortunately, a URL like .xxx is worth its weight in gold. Well, actually, it's worth a lot more than its weight because I don't know what a domain name was.
What's the Google www again?
So this is the TLD, or top level domain. This is typically a company name. This is often just called a domain. This is typically bought by a company. Like if you go to GoDaddy or go to one and one or whatever the other
Let's
domain.
not go to GoDaddy anymore.
Let's not do that.
They
Friends
kill
don't
all
let
of
friends
us.
go to GoDaddy. But anyway, you buy this name.
Correct.
And for most domains, especially if no one else has bought them yet, they're cheap. It's $10, $15.
Yeah, like you run across like a website and then there's some domain names.
Yeah. This is often trademarked. Companies will try and get domains that match their trademark. It's property. It really is property. There was a gold rush period. Everyone wanted the 3-letter domains, and then everyone wanted the 4-letter domains. Then everybody wanted domains that match company names, and then everybody wanted names that match celebrity names. And then people wanted commonly used words like sex or love or that sort of thing.
Somebody in the infancy went in and bought a whole bunch of names and then put them up for bid when he Kraft and Sears and
Yeah.
made lots of money because he thought about it before these companies put up their websites.
Yep. And it's an interesting line of work. You can make money on domain names alone. And in that case, that was illegal. Although the courts didn't understand it at the time, they developed case law that said if Sears owns the trademark on Sears, and someone else buys the domain name, Sears, then Sears has a right to buy that domain name. They don't have a right to take it. I mean, that's theft. But they have more right to that word than other people do. It's a trademark of theirs. So you can't refuse the sale. Now you can make a lot of money off it.
Yeah,
And then you get into the area of extortion and other limits that the legal system puts on sales and other kinds of transactions. In any case, these days, there are lots of domain names. Usually they're phrases, like I love mom or something like that. And there are people who make a decent living by just thinking up what's a phrase that someone's going to want. And they buy the domain for $10, and then they sell it for a couple $100 later. I actually bought a domain and sold it unexpectedly. I forget what it was. But a client had a particular website, and we sat down and brainstormed all of the phrases and all of the keywords that they might want to like, they might want to buy. We bought a bunch of domains. They didn't want them after a year, and I sold them off, 11 laps. So there's an auction environment for domain names. It's really a pretty decent, it's just like a real estate market anyway. This last thing is called a subdomain. Subdomain. Typically, you'll see this as www, the World Wide Web. I don't know where that comes from. It was probably the name of the first machine there in Switzerland with Berners-Lee. In any case, usually there's either a particular machine that is devoted to being the web server, or there's a virtual server, there's an address that sends your traffic. Now on a big web service cloud, you'll have many machines, at least 1, 2, maybe 100 different machines that all answer to this address. And there are things called load balancers and other things. Yes, sir?
So like, could a subdomain be like a, like it was like a web, there's an internet website called Bandcamp. It's like like the first things are always like the band's names and then it's like .bandcamp.com.
Yeah.
So that's a subdomain too, even if it's
Yeah.
subdomain.
So a lot of times you'll see news.google.com. Sometimes people like, if I were vain, I would have, or if I were smarter, and I had done this a long time ago, I have alan.zimmerman.com. There's a guy who has that. Vanity domains. It's like vanity plates. But in any case, it's a way for you to organize the information for your customers. So Google, in fact, has a couple of subdomains, all of which point to millions of machines, I imagine. They're all google.com, but there are different machines, different meaning here. You've seen this all before. So this is the address portion of the URL. Pay close attention to this domain when you're going to a place like a bank or any place where they're going to ask you for information. One of the other shady lines of business is people buy Google.com. Common misspellings. If you are one of those people that types a URL into your web browser, if you think of this as an address on a street, and the house of Google is a nice, friendly place to visit, all the houses around it are usually criminals, because they want you to land on their URL when you mistype their address.
Yeah, I've ran into that so many times.
Yep. And if you're lucky, all you get is one of those generic, this domain for sale, or search this domain. If you're unlucky, it looks exactly like Google, or exactly like your bank, and it starts loading stuff onto your machine and sucking information out of your life. So pay attention to this domain. It's one of the, it's an avenue for attack. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why we're spending attention on this URL. Not only is it that you know how you are, you know where you are, it also helps you link to other things. It is also your first line of attack in web security. People always attack here first. It's your perimeter. And if you're a security expert, you have to worry about these sort of things.
Yeah, one of the new things going on with banks right now is when you log in from, let's say, your home, they recognize your ISP. Let's say you log in from a different computer, it'll ask you for secure question security.
Yep. It'll say, I haven't seen you arrive on this machine before.
Yep.
And when we talk about security, we'll show you how they know what machine you're on when you arrive. This is important. In terms of security, you guys are going to be smarter than the average bear when it comes to using the web. That's why you're in this class. And one of the things you can do to help people out is when your grandma or whoever it is typing stuff into her web browser, you can help her learn. I know, grandma. Why don't do that? Watch that. So the next part of a URL is, again, first of all, this is required. Well, no, that's not true. Forget I said that. Forget that. We'll leave that till later. Now there's another column that is optional, and there's something called a port here. Now, the port that you usually use for a web address is what? Does anyone know? 80. That's the port for web traffic. How many ports does a computer have? Every computer has a network. How many ports do they have? 65,535. Why is it 65,535? Come on, I'm going to ask you this about every magic number, and it's going to come back.
Multiplied by something.
It's a power of 2, right?
Okay.
It's a 16-bit number. It's a power of 2. 600.
16 times 16.
535. It's what? 2 to the 16th minus 1. It's that hexadecimal, this is base 16. In CS 120, they go over this. A lot of computer magic numbers. Magic numbers, when I say that, I mean it's like a number that comes out of nowhere and someone says, well, if it's ever more than this, it doesn't work. And you're like, why? And they're like, that's a magic number.
It's like
Someone
the
picked it and it's good that forever. Yes, sir?
With the subnet mask, it's always like, it's 2 power of 2 minus 1.
Yeah, it's always a power of 2. In fact, computers store things as binary. They store them as a number of bits. The number of bits is the power of 2. But anyway, bottom line here is that oftentimes, if you're developing the web, a lot of people will be putting multiple web servers on one machine. They'll route you to a different port. If you are asked to click on something that has a port address in it, you better know why you're clicking on that. Because then also, if you ever click on something that has an IP address, a raw IP address, 192.168.1.3 or something like that, they didn't go to the trouble of buying a domain name for their machine, or maybe they don't want a domain name for their machine. Why? You need to know why. Now, if you're a web developer, this happens all the time. People are constantly throwing machines out, constantly putting, especially on your own intranet, throwing up machines, assigning them addresses, throwing things on different ports. Happens all the time as a web developer. As a web consumer, as just a guy off the street, if you see this sort of thing on an address, you got to think to yourself, why are they routing me to this address? Typically, if it's 80, typically you never see it.
So that's where it goes, is add port, the big number goes to like the port.
Yeah, so for example, I'm developing Ruby on Rails sites, and by convention, Ruby on Rails in developer mode comes up on port 3000. So when you bring up your first Rails site, the URL always looks like this. Localhost is a name, it's the name for your machine. Every machine knows its own name, and it also answers to the word localhost if it's being accessed from its own network. Port 3000 was just by convention used for that particular web framework. Other web frameworks have staked this stuff out. Below a certain number, below 1023, if it's less than 1023, there's an authority that decides who gets to use those ports. Like FTP is always port 21, SFTP is always port 22, the web's always port 80. But above this, it's the Wild West. If you've ever had to open up your firewall to play games, and you go to the web and they say, oh, make sure you open up port 4029, this port and that port, and open up this bank of ports between here and there. It's because that company just decided they were going to use those ports. Port forwarding. And a good firewall will allow you to manage which ports you let come in through the firewall and which machines on your net will answer to those ports. So when we get to the network segment, we'll come back around on ports. We'll talk more about them. By the time you're done with this class, you'll know what ports are and how to open them up and all that kind of wonderful stuff. Okay. Time for a break yet? Boy, it's overtime for a break, but I'm not done. You are locked into this until I let you go. Let's work our way to the end of the URL, then we'll come back around. The next thing is / path to file or resource. Now I write it like this to illustrate that there can be one or more things in this thing. So it's usually word / word / word. This whole thing is the path. That whole thing is the path. When we come back from the break, we'll go into this path in great depth. And then finally, after this path, oftentimes you'll see something, there's no slash here, there's a question mark. Who's seen this? There's a question mark at the end. And then what comes after the question mark? Say it louder, I can't hear. I'm holding it. Sometimes numbers. What else have you seen after the question mark?
Parameters.
Parameters. Yeah. There's a query string or parameters after the question mark. This is typically used when you want to send something up to the web server. You're asking for a resource and you're saying, here are the parameters that I want with this resource. I'll show you an example in a minute. And then finally, there's a thing that I frankly don't understand, which I saw in the standard called a fragment. I don't see that very often. I don't know what that is. That's part of the standard. So what we've got here is this is the full formal form of a URL. There's a scheme or a protocol. There's these double slashes sometimes. There's a poorly used set of credentials. Credentials are a word that's rooted to the same thing as credit, creditable. If you have credit, people trust you with their money. If you're creditable, people trust your opinion. If you supply credentials, people trust your access to the computer. Then you've got the address. Sometimes you have a port. Then you've got the path. And you've got a query string. Okay. Let's do a quick example and then we'll take a break. Question?
I noticed that on my Windows 7 box at home with the new Firefox, it strips off the HTTP / now.
Yep.
It's sort of implied, you don't have to type it in.
Yep. An IE6, you can type search strings in there, and Chrome brought that back. You can type in anything into your URL bar. Browsers are pretty tolerant. Browsers really, the thing that is different from a security standpoint, in the old days, you were on a machine, and that machine was the only thing, and the security experts only had to make sure that you were secure in this context. A lot of times you were either a guy at a college or you were at a university, you were at a company. It was kind of a work thing. And if you weren't trained, someone would train you. Later on, they had clients that talked to a server. Both of those were under control. And if the user didn't know what they were doing, someone would train them. These days, with the web, we get everybody. And people type in the strangest stuff. People people stick their fingers in the strangest places. You never know where they've been, and you never know what they're going to do, and they're your customers. So your web browsers have grown up to be extremely tolerant of almost anything people will type in, and they will try very hard to come up with something meaningful that will be relevant to these customers. And no one's ever going to train them. No one's ever going to train them. Security in a web context is a nightmare. And that's why it's so lucrative. If you guys want to get into security, man, you can make a lot of money. On the other side of it, though, if you're a web designer, and that's why I keep pushing you on validation, if you're a web designer, your URLs should be well-formed. They should be accurate. They should follow the rules. Because that's what we do. When we're designers, we do it right. It also helps your pages work better. So I plugged in, I hope you can read this, I plugged in www.google.com, it took me to Google. Notice how quickly that happened? Man, Google comes back fast. It's lovely. So I'm going to type in the word query string. And actually I'm going to try and type it with the real words. And I hit that, and look what happened to the URL. It gave me the URL from before. Here, let me catch this and then blow it up. Look at that marvelous URL. So they have skipped over everything and gone right to that fragment. the end there. And they are encoding all sorts of really cool stuff into that fragment. My language is English. I've got some sort of regular expression. And then deep in there is what I asked for. The query is query string. And they've got all sorts of other stuff in their URL.
So the rest of that, stuff on the URL is hidden then, like?
No, it's right out in the middle of there. Everyone can see it. The reason they put it in the URL, does anyone have any idea why you would want to put all of this information in the URL? Any idea? One of the things you can do with URLs is you can bookmark them. Bookmarking a URL means just remembering it, just storing it. So this is a way for you to bookmark a search and mail it to somebody else and say, hey, look, I found all this neat stuff. Or for you to remember it. If you put something in the URL, then it can be bookmarked, saved, and sent around. So they're packing all sorts of stuff into the URL. Let's go look at their maps. Let's see if we can zoom in on where we are. There we are. Look at that. Wonderful stuff. They're storing, well, that's still the old one. If I want, how do I save the URL? Back here, let's do PCC rock. There we go. All of this stuff is being, what's really weird is now I've still got that query string from before, and it's remembering that I originally searched for query string, but now I'm on the maps. Now I'm in maps.com.
Back up.
This is kind of interesting. Who here has a gmail.com address? Piece of email? Did you get that piece of email a couple days ago that said they're changing their privacy policy?
Yep.
Is that okay with you? Who cares, right? It's just Google, what the heck. Google is remembering everything about you that they can. They really are trying very hard to know who you are and what you want. This is one of the ways that they do it. Anyway, don't want to go too deep.
On the top of that, there's actually a warning that says, we're
Yep.
changing our private policy.
Yep. Some people are really upset with Google about why they're doing this. Some people don't care. Some people think it's a great idea.
Well, it's a big change of what their policy was about 10 years ago. They refused to tell the government any information.
Yep.
When they're doing their Google Maps.
Yep.
When they're doing their Google Maps.
Oh, about, supposed terrorist, information, investigations, they refused.
Yeah.
There's certain areas in Google Maps where you can't actually like see anything clearly because
Yeah.
they're classified areas. Yeah, they,
They're getting rid of over 60 different privacy policies.
It's a really cool thing. We'll come back around on privacy next week. We'll talk a bit about some of the aspects of privacy. Just wanted you to show that Google is probably is indeed state of the art in terms of web technology. Those guys have thousands of PhDs pushing web technology as fast and as far as they can. So the way they use URLs is ahead of the way everybody else uses URLs. They're storing everything they know about me in that URL. It's wonderful. It's an amazing thing. You guys don't have to go that far, luckily for us. In any case, let's take a 5-minute break, and then let's take a look at that path aspect of a URL.